Well, hello again, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's BU Alumni Career Coach Q&A, leveraging AI for the job search. My name is Jeff Murphy. I'm a member of the Alumni Career Engagement Team from the BU Alumni Association. Today's event is the first installment of a four-part series called Future Ready, Put AI to Work for Your Career Resilience. If you see in the lower right-hand side of your screen, you should see a QR code. Click on that, take a picture of that, and that'll allow you to sign up for the remaining events we have in the series. If you haven't already, we've got our next one coming up this Thursday and then two more in October. They're all going to be fantastic, and I hope you'll join us for those. All of our alumni career events are offered to our 389,000 alumni around the globe, and of course, also our current students. We appreciate everyone who's joined us today, some of you tuning in from some very faraway places. Throughout your career, BU is committed to helping you define and achieve your professional goals, and we aim to do this by providing everyone with access to a series of valuable programs, tools, and communities. In addition to this webinar series, one of our most exciting resources is a free online community called BU Connects. If you haven't already signed up for that, I hope you'll take just 5 minutes after this presentation to log in, set up your free account at buconnects.com. We have over 37,000 BU alumni, students, and faculty and staff already on BU Connects. It is the very best place to build your professional network with other terriers. You can join regional and special interest groups, and you can also become a mentor, find a mentor, or hopefully do both. Before I introduce our guest coach for today, just a few housekeeping notes about how our hour together will go today. We are here to answer any and all questions you have about leveraging AI for the job search. We're going to get things started though with a short presentation on the subject. Then we'll get to the Q&A. Once we open up the Q&A, you're welcome to submit questions again using the Q&A panel on your Zoom toolbar. We're expecting a really large crowd today, so I'm also going to ask all of you to keep an eye on that. You have the ability today to upvote the questions that come in. That will allow us to know who's most interested in hearing what questions have been submitted, and we're going to make sure to get to as many of those as we can. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day, BU College of Arts and Sciences alum Scott Singer. Scott is founder and president of Insider Career Strategies LLC, where he works with individuals and companies to prepare for and navigate the job seeking and outplacement process. His experience recruiting at major corporations such as Motorola, Ryder, Bacardi, Burger King, and LVMH. Scott holds a BA from Boston University and an MBA from the University of Michigan Dearborn. Also has a CPCC, a Certified Professional Career Coach, and Certified Professional Resume Writer credentials. Scott's also a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. Scott, you have done so much to share your expertise with the BU community over the years. We're delighted to have you here doing this for us today. I know you've got a short presentation we're going to do. It's up on the screen now, looking great. And please go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, and thank you so much, and thank you to BU and to everybody who's attending. It's been a pleasure to have been doing this for 10 years now. I can't believe it's been that long. But Jeff, you've been a tremendous partner, and I've really enjoyed working with you on this over the year. And it's always great because I get to dive in deeper on some interesting topics, and you always bring some interesting questions to this as well. So thank you to everybody for coming today. As Jeff had mentioned, we'll take tons of questions today, whatever you'd like to ask. And even if it's a little off the rails here in terms of maybe a different career type of topic, we can certainly go there too. Let's just keep it civil. So let's talk today about the big topic though. So AI, I'm sure everybody here is terrified of AI or excited by it or trying to find the way to use it to make their lives easier or to make other people's lives more difficult, however you want to look at it. But the biggest piece that if you're ever looking for a job, I'm sure you've noticed it's been permeating the hiring process. So from the standpoint of how is it playing in, well, first of all, it's hitting the applicant tracking system. So if you're ever going into a job online and you're applying to a company, the ATS, the applicant tracking systems, will gathers your resume and goes ahead and the recruiter goes ahead and uses that to sort through it. And I'm sure everybody here has been through that pain at one point or another. And Jeff and I, we've done presentations before about how to deal with the ATS. That not really getting deep into that in this presentation, but um, as far as how companies are using it, the first thing they're doing is they're actually starting to automate the resume gathering process. So, what do I mean by that? I mean that, people that may have applied to jobs with a company before, it may go through and hunt their database to see who might be a fit for a particular job. But they're also using it to go out there and to search the internet, search LinkedIn, see if there's other people that might have a background, and pulling that background into their applicant tracking system, regardless of whether or not you applied to the job. Also, communications. It's starting to read the messaging and how you're presented, and how recruiters can click a button and have it shape some communications with job seekers and with other people. Obviously, the big one that everyone worries about, and I get a lot of questions: how am I going to get through the applicant tracking system? Is this going to go ahead and get through the algorithms? You know, algorithms are a moving target, but companies do set up algorithms and they do use AI to try to find the best qualified individual. So, with regard to that, AI is an integral part, as is, just at its most basic level, keyword matching. And, you might think, okay, well, that's great. It's not a very complicated technology, to have, say, Microsoft Office look for Microsoft Office in a job description. But AI is really kind of getting out there and trying to think beyond the boundaries. How does a human being think? It may look for G Suite, Google Suite. It might look for other word processing or applications or other spreadsheets or Smartsheet. Have some of that flexible thinking in terms of how it's doing some of the keyword matches. So even if your word doesn't match up exactly, maybe it'll still get caught. But also, there's the other piece of this, which is that recruiters and companies are using it to build job descriptions. They're using it to schedule interviews. A lot of the times, you'll see that somebody will reach out to you to schedule an interview. It may not even be a human being on the other end of that. It may be a computer system that's doing that and checking people's calendars. And, it's got a name, Fred, or whatever it's going to be called. It'll give it a human name to make it a little more approachable. And then there's video interview tools. I'm sure many of you have heard of HireVue. HireVue is one of those tools that basically, um, I hate to say it, it's a miserable thing to go through, but what it is it's basically a company will send you a HireVue link, and you will be forced to, I guess forced isn't quite the word, but you're going to be strongly encouraged to do an interview where it's going to ask you questions, you're going to provide it answers, and the AI is going to evaluate your video for your body language, for your verbal language, for your answers, and provide recommendations to an employer as to whether or not they think you'd be a good risk. And then, of course, there's the decision and selection tools. You've got where it's going to, let's take this from a much broader perspective. Try to think of it this way. As I'm sure some of you who are on here who have been hiring managers in the past, there's an element of knowing what you look for in a resume, things beyond the simple job descriptions and simple, achievements of what someone's done. You're looking for certain types of experiences, certain types of backgrounds. Often employers will use the AI software to go through and look for patterns in terms of resumes and provide people that may be a good risk. Now, that comes with risk also from an employer standpoint. And some companies have been sued because, it's gone through and it's done this, and the people that trained the engines apparently didn't do quite the right job because everybody that came back was a white male between the age of 25 and 45, just as an example. So, there's been some litigation that have happened to it, but it is creeping into the process and it's really there. Now, one of the questions that I frequently get asked is, um, when I'm applying online for a job, it'll say, should I opt in for AI? Meaning the job posting, the company will put in there, it'll say, would you allow AI to do an assessment of your resume as part of this process? And people ask, should I do that? Um, the answer that I give to that is probably. It's an uncomfortable thing, but what's happening is that if you take back how the recruiters look through resumes, recruiters are overworked. They've got a ton of jobs they're working on. They're going to use the system to automate as much as possible. And I've gotten conflicting answers on this from a variety of folks I've spoken to in the recruiting and technology field. But The way that it seems is that if you're given the option to let it opt in for AI, that means that you're giving it a chance to give you a higher ranking. And if I'm a recruiter and I'm time limited, I'm probably going to take a look at the ones that have been ranked first by the AI before moving on to the resumes that haven't, just from an efficiency standpoint. So, just be aware that might be something you want to keep in mind. Now let's talk about it from the job seeker standpoint. There are benefits and there are risks to this, from the employer standpoint. So first of all, human capital efficiencies. It makes things, human capital is a much nicer way of saying human resources, but it makes the process easier. That's why they're going to use it. They want to make sure that they can reduce the amount of labor that's involved and let the software take care of some of the more difficult things. Also, it's a time savings. As we get into work environments where there's more and more demands on us, the idea being that if you can use the applicant tracking system and the AI that's in that to do some of the hard mental work and do some of the initial sorts, it's going to provide you the ability to do some more value added activities. And then the other benefit is that to spark creativity. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is that maybe somebody's sitting there and they're writing a job description and they're going to say, you know what? I really would like to try to make this job description a little more appealing and running it through, for example, a chat GPT, let it rewrite it, make it a little bit more marketing focused. Or maybe it can give you some ideas on, hey, chat GPT, are there things that I should highlight when I'm posting a job for an IT specialist or a CFO? And it can give you that based on the data that it's got in there. So from a sparking creativity standpoint, it's definitely going to play a role, but there are risks. First of all, using AI without the proper user skills is asking for trouble. And the reason I say that is that AI is a complicated technology. It may seem friendly, it might seem like this is your new best friend in a computer form, but it's the kind of thing that it's all about making sure that you're being effective in terms of what you're putting into this. So it doesn't have the personalization and authenticity that an individual does. So if an employer goes ahead and it uses the AI to write the job description, it's going to look like something that's very generic and it may have been pulled from a variety of different sources. So that can hurt an employer's trust. Also, as I mentioned, sometimes employers are using it for communications with candidates. An AI generated note is going to look like an AI generated note. Also, tool judgment. Has everybody here heard the expression GIGO, garbage in, garbage out? What I mean by that is that an AI system needs to be trained, and that's what happens. And it happens at the factory, when Google or whoever else is going ahead and building their AI engine, they're feeding it data. They're feeding it algorithms. They're feeding it decision processes. And the better that those go in, the better they come out. The problem is that the tool is not personal. It doesn't know you. It's very much a broad program designed to serve millions, if not billions of people. So the tool is going to have judgment that is limited in that regard, and it's going to have to kind of thread the needle. It's going to go towards the middle. So it's only as good as the things that go in and then come out on the other end. Also, it has an imagination. So when you are putting in a job description, let's just use as an example. Let's say that you go ahead and you say, I would like to write a job description for a human resources director. You put that in, you put in the data that you have, and it'll go ahead and it'll produce you a job description. And maybe it'll use everything you have. Maybe it'll make some things up. It'll pull some data from other places. And we're going to talk about this in a moment, but from a candidate standpoint, it comes with the same risks. People that use AI to build a resume, they're going to find there's often some facts in there that have no grounding in what they've actually done. AI will have filled in some blanks. Also, as we talked about, employment bias and legal exposure, if you are using it as an employer to make some decisions as a candidate, as a hiring manager rather, is it looking for the right things? Is it looking for the right factors? Is it doing it in a legal manner that's going to pass through the Equal Employment Opportunity Agency and other regulations, or whatever happens in your market? So you need to be aware of that. Also, plagiarism. This goes back to GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. AI is trained And how do you train it? You train it with documents. And there's document after document after document that goes in there. And by the way, if you ever use AI to put a document in there and have it review it and don't tell it not to, it will make it part of that database. So your document that you put in there could end up becoming fodder for somebody else's document. You're training the machine as well. And so it's going to borrow what it knows from because, frankly, that's what plagiarism is. It takes from one place to another. And then, of course, the bigger question is, do they really know what they're doing with it? It's funny. I run in a lot of circles with a lot of folks that are in organizational development and executive coaching. And I have a friend who's been an executive coach for many years. And one of the things she tells me is that she does a lot of coaching with CEOs who come to her and they say, I need an AI strategy for my company. And that's great. But her response is, no, you don't need an AI strategy. You need a corporate strategy, and you need to be able to use the AI to support that strategy. So, is an employer using AI just to feel smart, just to try to cut heads? Or do they have a specific purpose and they're hiring subject matter experts to go ahead and implement that? So, that's definitely a risk there from an employer standpoint. Talk about looking in the mirror. There's a lot of things that are benefits and risks here for job seekers as well. So first of all, benefits, it streamlines communications. You can use it to really, if you're thinking about brainstorming a document or coming up with something clean, you can use it to help you edit a document. You can use it to help prepare for interviews. Hey, I'm interviewing for a job as a port director. What are some questions that I might be asked? And if it's had that type of experience before and it's been trained on that, it can tap into that and come up with some of those questions. You can also provide some answers and let it evaluate those. And then, of course, sparking the creative process. Remember, I talked about, if you're going to have it write a resume, you know, yes, you can absolutely do that. And maybe this is a nice way to do this. Hey, Chat GPT, how should I highlight this achievement? You can break things down into little pieces and let it go ahead and synthesize the words and come up with some new ways to say things. But, or hey, I need to send a thank you letter to an employer. What's something I might send? What's a general template for this? And then whatever you're doing, you want to make sure that you customize that. You're using it to spark the process. So the risks, again, using it without the proper skills. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get into trouble with it. It has an imagination. It's going to make things up. It's going to steal from other places. It's using the same garbage in, garbage out mentality. If it's great data, it's going to be great. If not, it's not. This is the part that you really need to think about, though, which is the inauthentic or dishonest presentation. Meaning, if you're using AI to come up with answers, it's going to seem like it comes from AI. So you need to take a step back. Even if you're using it to spark creativity, take what's there and go ahead and tweak it and change it and modify it. I'm also going to share, Jeff. I have a friend who's a recruiter, and he had a client or a candidate that he had sent out to a client. The candidate was doing an interview. It was a Zoom interview, much like this. And what happened was that he was on a behavioral interview. The employer would ask him questions. He would take a short break, and it looked like he was typing. And then his answers came back. He was verbalizing the answers. They seemed pretty generic to the employer. What happened was that the employer caught on. They started pumping the same exact questions into ChatGPT, and when they realized that they were getting the exact same answers from him that they were getting from ChatGPT, they cut off the interview, said thank you very much, because they knew it wasn't an authentic presentation. If you're going to cheat, at least be smart about it. That was not a great way to do it. Another risk is thought and creative atrophy. I mean, you really want to make sure that if you're providing product, if you're doing a business case for an interview, if you're providing details, that you're sparking your own creativity. That's what people are hiring you for. They want to know that you're bringing something to the table, unique and a good perspective. The more you rely on an assistant, which is what ChatGPT is, the less, or any of these AI engines, the less creative you're going to be. And then, of course, there's a temptation to shortcut. Well, I really should go ahead and put together a report, but maybe I can use ChatGPT to go ahead and put that together. Um, and I'm sure, Jeff, on the academic side, you guys are facing a lot of this. That's why professors are putting papers through ChatGPT and other engines to see if they can, if they come back similar to what students are putting in. You don't want to shortcut this. You want to make sure that whatever you're providing is truly your product. If you're doing something, the expression in business is value add. Are you adding something to that presentation? So let's talk about the keys to AI. If you're going to use AI, how can you be successful? First of all, think of it as that really smart intern or assistant. I'm sure everybody here has either been on an internship and you thought, great, I know everything. And then you get into an office environment and you realize, well, great, I know what I learned in the books, but I have no idea what goes on here. And, as an intern, you're pumping out ideas and they may or may not be applicable. And then the manager you're working for is like, yeah, great, thanks, but this is how we really do it. So try to think of AI the same way. It's that really smart intern or assistant that's going to give you some good feedback and some things to think about, or maybe some suggestions. But in the end, it's really your judgment that's going to make the difference, your judgment and your experience. So use it for research. Don't use it for thought replacement. Again, everybody here, I'm sure, who's on this Zoom call has an intellectual capacity to be able to come up with ideas and to be able to do research and to be able to synthesize that and to come up with findings and to come up with conclusions. Use it for that, for support on that, but don't use it as the replacement. In the end, it's really about you. What is it that you bring and what's your unique perspective on the world and what's the value add? Don't take any AI product for granted. None. Anything you get from AI, edit it, tweak it, look at it, review it, proofread it, make sure that it's factual, make sure that it's correct, so that you can truly understand the nuances. You're going to leverage your nuances in the job market to apply. If you're building your resume or if you're building a cover letter, knowing what you know to go ahead and to tweak that when you're going ahead and applying or prevent creating documents. Also, truly understands which activities are value add for you in the job hunt. Look, let's be honest, okay? If you're gonna send a cover letter to an employer, honestly, 9 times out of 10, an employer's not even gonna read it. All right. So if you're going to use ChatGPT, that's probably a great place to get a general framework for a cover letter, tweak a few features, send it off, and call it a day. But if you're going to send a thank you note and you're going to reference something from your interview, don't have ChatGPT do that. Do it yourself. Really think about that. If you're talking about building a resume, build that resume yourself. If you're talking about doing a business case for, this job that you're coming in, you're applying for a job as a McKinsey consultant, you are the value add. That's where you really need to think about how you can contribute to that. Learn and understand how the tools work. There is a learning curve, folks. There's a learning curve associated with this. Each tool has its own nuances and its own biases and its own approach. But also, for example, if you're asking for something small, you're going to get a higher quality product than something big. What I mean by that is, if you need help putting together a particular bullet point or an achievement for your resume, putting in data for that one bullet point is going to be far more productive than asking it to write you a whole job description and a resume altogether, because it's going to go in so many different directions. The more that you can feed it specific information, the more that it's going to come up with a tighter answer. Put in place your guardrails. What I mean by this is that, well, there's several things. Number one, if you know what it can do and you know what it can't do, make sure that you understand that and you abide by that and you're true to yourself on that. Also, if you're using it for work, your employer may not love you using ChatGPT or Copilot or any of these tools at work, or they may want you to. But a lot of companies that have AI as part of their workflows are coming up with policies. You've got to think about your job hunt the same way. You've got to think of, okay, here's the guardrails that I'm going to use for this. I'm going to make sure that I'm only using it for functions A, B, and C, that I am going to proofread it, that I'm going to do fact checking, that I am going to make sure that it ends up in my own language. I'm going to make sure that I don't put in documentation on this that could be sucked up by the system and end up used in somebody else's resume or document. You've got to think about what those guardrails are and use those appropriately. And don't sacrifice expertise for convenience. You have expertise. Everybody here on this call has expertise of some sort or another. Don't sacrifice that. That's what people hire. That's what people, if you're in a hiring position, don't hand off the hiring decision to the applicant tracking system and to the AI that's behind it. Make sure that you're using AI in a meaningful way, that you are using it as part of your decision process and not in substitute of it. And then lastly, retain authenticity in the process. The documents that you get from an AI engine, they're going to be relatively generic. The language is going to be relatively generic. It's going to be kind of flowery, and it's going to sound kind of general business speak. Um, so, keep in mind that you want to retain authenticity in this process, and that means for those of you who are English majors, you're putting it into your own voice. You're making sure that it sounds like you, feels like you, and that it really reflects you. So that is the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hand this off to you, Jeff. Let's go for it.
Scott, thanks so much. I know I gave you kind of a Herculean task in trying to do like a short presentation at the beginning, but I know we already have some great questions that have come in, so let's dive in. You just talked about sacrificing expertise for convenience. And Mark asked an interesting question in the chat that I know you're going to have a great answer for, and I don't think that you'll take offense to it. But this is a really interesting thing in today's day and age. Why would somebody want to hire you, Scott, to write their resume when they can just have AI do it for them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know what? That's a fantastic question. Why wouldn't you? ChatGPT is there, and it's a great tool, and so forth. But I mean, look, whether you hire a resume writer or you do it yourself, in the end, the data has to reflect you. If you are skilled in a chat GPT and you are skilled at prompt engineering, that's what it's called when you're putting the data in, and you can effectively get the product that you want on the other end, you should. You absolutely should use it. It's a great tool. Use it. And I'll also be honest. Look, hiring a resume writer is not a necessity. It's a luxury. There's people that can afford to do it. There's people that can't. That's okay. I like to think I provide a good service for the world. I'm sure most of my clients feel that way. I'm sure there's a few that don't, but look, in the end, it's all about making sure that you're getting the right data and that you're telling it in an effective way. And if you can bend an AI engine to do that, if you can make that happen and you can make it sing, more power to you. Do it. But again, know what the rails are, know what it can do, and know what it can't do.
And I should have known this going in that you'd be a little bit too modest. Scott, it's also, I mean, what we're talking about today is how do you stand out when tools like AI make it easier than ever for somebody to apply to 250 jobs, which I know people are doing that anyway. And it's all about specifically tailoring your application materials to the precise needs of the job description, the company. And that isn't necessarily something that a computer is going to do. So, this gets into
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. So, tailoring a resume for a job is an outstanding use for an AI engine. It's an amazing use for it, right? If you're applying to a job and you're using a Copilot or you're using a Chat GPT or any of these engines, there's nothing wrong with pumping in your resume and your job description and saying, "Hey, can you help me find can you make some suggestions in terms of what I can tweak my resume to be a better match for this job?" That's great. As long as you take what it says, it's not as gospel, but here are some things that you can look at. Okay, does that make sense? Should I change that? Yes. Does this look good? Is this something I should do? That's a fantastic use case. Other things you can do. I mean, using ChatGPT, let's play around with this. You want to do some ChatGPT case studies here?
I think we can get to that, but I've got some great questions that I think are going to
All right.
allow us to continue to sort of set the stage here. Bob asked a great question that I think would have been perfect to ask first. Bob, thanks for submitting that. But Scott, on your last slide, you talked about you have to understand what the value add is for somebody as a job seeker, as a job candidate to leverage these tools. So Bob's question is, where in the job searching process do you see is the best use for AI for a candidate? Is there a specific task that AI is really great at or not? And Scott, I'm sure this is going to depend on the individual who's, the candidate, but where do you see as like a great place for somebody to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI, I think honestly, the thing that I found AI to be really, really good at is there's two things that at least from my workflow standpoint and from what I see that can be useful. Number one is the compare and contrast. Like I talked about, like if you're applying to a job, hey, what are you, here's the job description, here's my resume. It can quickly look at the two and say, okay, here's some things that maybe you want to think about changing. It's really good and it's really fast at that. I think the other thing is that it's really good at is form documentation. A cover letter, that's a great place because you can build a template for a cover letter, you customize it, you have it ready to go. Um, but there are, here's the thing. There are so many use cases for AI out there right now. You've got to think about it strategically, and your time matters too, right? Um, one of the things that's out there, and I know there's a question about this, and I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit, which is, and I love the way, where's that question? Somebody said about flooding the zone where you can, here it
Hmm.
is. Andy Hasina, with the prevalence of AI allowing applicants to flood the zone and use AI and AI usage by HR as a filtering tool. There are services that are out there that'll apply to a ton of jobs using AI on your behalf. It's not a good value add. It's not, because you end up with something that's kind of middle of the road, milk toast, not really sharing your unique value proposition. And what happens is that I can tell you, having been on the other end where you're reviewing resumes, it looks like it was a spam. It looks like it was mass mailed. And yeah, it's going to be a little bit nicer than it was 10 years ago when, a service might just, dear hiring manager, but that's not a good use. Where you can use AI in another great use case is, let me give an example. One of the things that I always tell people, is when you're applying to a job, if you really want to, try to get noticed, one of the best things you can do is, first things first, spend 5 minutes tweaking your resume and applying online if there's a job online. Great. You've done that, you've looked at the keywords, you've applied, you've made it a better fit. The next thing you do is you see if you can identify a hiring manager through LinkedIn at the company. Now, okay, then you send them a note and you introduce yourself and, hi, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Scott Singer. I have applied online to position X at company Y. I have X years of experience. Here's a copy of my resume for your convenience. Love to talk to you. You've already applied, so you've overcome that objection. But what you're doing is you're also personally networking. Is it going to work in every time? No, but let's play a game here. All right. So let's say, can we see my chat GPT here?
Yes,
All right.
thanks.
So let's say, okay, I identify Jeff Murphy at BU as the hiring manager. What is the email format for Boston University? Okay, now we have an email format. Do you have the email address for Jeff Murphy at Boston University? Thinking. Wow, it's definitely, I don't know why this is such a difficult question for it.
Well, it's taking, it's burning up four. Oh, look at
Is that
that.
accurate?
Burning up 4 glasses of water every time you put this in, right? That's a whole
Yeah, it
other thing
is.
that we could talk about another
Yeah,
time.
by the way, this, in the time I put that in, the sea level's gone down by an inch. But is this right? Is this your email address, JT
It is.
Murphy?
It's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's a little bit different when you're dealing with a university because universities, the email addresses tend to be more public. But let's say, okay, can I find the email format for Scott Singer at Insider Career Strategies? So
Do you
that's
have
just
your
one of
email
them.
address on your website?
Yeah, it's out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's out there, and it'll be out there with all the presentations I've done and everything else too.
Right.
But
Right.
that's a good use of it because it's going to iterate. Okay, here's all the different email formats. You can find and you can decide, okay, I'm going to send the email. Maybe there's 3 different formats. There it is. That's the email format. Yep. So, you've got that ability to do that. And, think about this. I mean, it might say, okay, there's a few different ways that it comes up. All right, so send it the 3 different ways that it suggests. The worst thing that happens is 2 bounce back and the third gets there.
Yeah. Scott, let's go into rapid fire question mode here. You've obviously been leaning on ChatGPT as the one that you maybe are most familiar with. That certainly is become the household name. But are there other AI tools that you can think of that might be useful to somebody as a job seeker? And if you know key differences between, obviously these are all large language models. They're all trained on different documents as you talked about. But
I
Jeanette
think,
wanted to know your thoughts on that.
yeah, I'm probably not the right one to get into the nitty-gritty details about this. I think it's more kind of like Coke versus Pepsi versus RC Cola.
Yeah.
For those of you who are old enough to remember RC Cola, it still does exist, but there was a point in the 80s when it was actually overtaking Pepsi. But that's a whole nother conversation. So, yes, I am partial to ChatGPT, but I find it a little vanilla. The one that I really enjoy from a style standpoint is Microsoft Copilot.
Mhm.
I think it has a little more flair, and I think Microsoft has enough resources to really kind of pump into it to make it interesting. But I got to be honest with you, with all of these, again, it's just a little bit of a flavor of the different type of, the same thing. So, I mean, you could probably find someone who's a real data, engineer to get into the details about that. But, if I want something that's got a little more style, I really am partial to
Yeah.
Copilot.
I want to thank those of you who've been upvoting the questions that are already sitting here. We'll make sure to get to the most upvotes. We'll definitely get to. But I had wanted to make sure we covered this. And Scott, you just talked about this a little bit. But how Susan wants to know, how do hiring managers know whether a cover letter has been written by AI or a person? And that's assuming that it's not even a robot on the other end that's first doing the first read of that cover letter, right?
Uh, yeah. They can pump it into ChatGPT and they can test it. That's
Right.
it. And here's okay, so here's a real interesting question. Who was it that asked that question? Because that was a great one.
Susan.
Susan. So, Susan, there's a lot going on right now with, it's funny, everything that comes around goes around. And, employers who have been making the process so damn impersonal for years, making it difficult for job seekers to reach employers, which is a function of size of the companies and the number of applicants. But I mean, they have so they employ all these engines and they employ all these screeners and everything that goes in between. And then all of a sudden, I've been reading all sorts of news about employers that are upset that candidates do the exact same thing, and it's like, all right, come on.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, so I've seen, some companies that say, well, we're going to rule people out if they do that there. You know, I think you've got to, first of all, I think in most cases they're not going to bother to put that in there. I think, what's really more important is I think the question to ask yourself is the cover letter interesting? Is it going to draw somebody in if I'm sending a cover letter? That's really, I think, the more important question. Um, you know, but it's not real hard. It's like the example I gave about somebody doing the interview where the, HR folks just started putting the same questions into ChatGPT. They can tell. It's straightforward. And stuff that is written by AI is going to look like it's written by AI. So spend a little time customizing it.
Yeah.
And I just want to add one other thing.
Sure.
If you're going into a knowledge-based job, like I want to give you an example, I have to imagine that if you're sending it to, I don't know, Joe's Crab Shack, they're not going to care so much if you did a ChatGPT cover letter. If you're applying to a job at Ernst& and Young or Boston Consulting Group, I would bet donuts to dollars they're going to put that through and see if you've actually written it yourself and what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Naomi wants to know, where is the best place to learn more about prompt engineering? How do you do that best job of not doing garbage in, garbage out? How are you leveraging these AI tools to do the best prompt engineering you absolutely can? While you answer that question, I actually think our the BU Center for Career Development has done a really good job of sharing some sample prompts that you might use for different reasons. So I'm going to share that in the chat, and I'll send that in a follow-up email to everybody. But Scott, you've obviously, I'm going to guess you've just done this by trial and error. You've gotten in there and you've played with these things to figure out what
Yeah.
works, what doesn't. But what's your advice to folks who are looking to learn more about how to do that the right way?
So first of all, there's a couple of different things you need to think about, right? Do you want to become an expert or do you want to learn the fundamentals? Right? There's a lot of programs, there's certificate programs. I know a lot of the universities around here in South Florida, like Florida Atlantic offers, data engineering and AI certificates. Um, but I think if you're going to do it, let's start with where you get the best bang for your buck. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn Learning. If you've got a premium subscription, it's going to teach you a lot of the fundamentals. And you can see here it's included with your subscription. So there's an hour-long course in prompt engineering with ChatGPT, teaches you some of the basics. The other thing I wanted to mention is each industry that you're in is going to have continuing education. If you're in a specific type of field, like if you're looking, I know I'm shifting this a little more vocationally, but if you're thinking about, like, I'll give you an example. My wife is a writer editor, business writer editor, and medical writer editor. And, the associations she's belonged to have had courses on using AI and prompt engineering to do that type of writing. Every industry is doing it. I've seen it from the resume writing and the career coaching fields too. So, every industry is coming through with those if you want to learn something specific about it.
Um, I also want to mention here, there are a large number of, you mentioned Florida Atlantic. BU also is doing quite a bit of work in helping people learn how to use large language models and AI better. So when you get a follow-up email from me after this, we're going to include a link to the recording here, but I'll also share some of those specific Boston University resources around prompt engineering, et cetera, et cetera. Or you could just use ChatGPT to find them on your own. But
Or
uh,
here's Google, MIT, Johns
yeah,
Hopkins.
I'm sure that a lot of this great stuff is on YouTube too, where you might have to be a little bit more discerning. But yep, there we
Generative
go.
AI tools. Here you go. So
Yeah.
yeah, actually, that's the other thing too, is I think a lot of people forget this, but YouTube is an amazing, amazing resource. And you see, it's not just an instruction manual, it's people showing you how to do things. It's interesting. There's a YouTube channel of a guy who just, he didn't have a father, so he taught, he learned how to, I don't know if anybody's
I
seen this.
saw that. He's doing videos to help other
Doing
people
videos
that
on
didn't
life
have a
skills, how to
dad.
change the
Yeah.
oil in your car, how
Yeah.
to change the air conditioning filter in your house, how to repair a doorknob. You can find all this stuff relatively easily. And by the way, pro tip here, if you want to add things to your resume, skills and experiences, take a course online and add it as professional development. Just put it down there. You can say self-directed coursework in Chat GPT and AI prompt engineering. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that. And it'll give you an additional keyword search.
And thanks to Monica, who in the chat mentioned that for those of you like me who don't have a LinkedIn Pro edition, you can actually access LinkedIn Learning for free via most public libraries with your library card. Monica, thanks for sharing that. All right, Mark asked a great question that I'm personally identifying with. I'm over 50. What should I and shouldn't I put on my resume so the company I'm applying to does not know how old I am? I feel that why would a company hire someone who, let's say, is 60 over someone who is 30? So how you've done previous webinars for us about this, Scott. What's your best advice for Mark and people like me who are like, how do I compete with the younger whippersnappers?
Yeah, maybe you can find the link to the presentation I did before with that too.
Absolutely, I can
Yeah.
share that. Yeah.
Um, Great question, and it's a recurring question because it's important. And I think a couple things. First of all, get rid of the dates on your education. You don't need to put your college degree here. It doesn't matter. Nobody needs to hear that. Second of all, um, try to think about how strategically far you need to go back on your resume in terms of your experience. Nobody's asking you for an encyclopedic Wikipedia entry of everything you've done. So, if it's something that you can cleanly put your past 7 to 10 years of experience, great, do that. If you've been at the same company for 30 years and maybe you've changed jobs a few times within that company, pick the last 2 jobs and put that in there, and then just put the dates of the specific role in there. But there's a lot of little things you can do there. And of course, this is also another thing in the United States. You're not supposed to put your picture on your resume. It's just not good practice. LinkedIn's a little bit of a different platform, so make sure you're looking good.
And I just put the link to your previous Fighting Age Discrimination webinar in the chat here, and I'll include that in the follow-up email to everybody.
Thank you.
Um, Scott, you touched on this, but how do you feel about those AI tools that auto apply to companies? Should it be a part of the strategy or avoid it altogether?
The feedback that I've gotten, I mean, and this is where I get technical. I mean, the feedback, I get quantitative. The feedback I've gotten from people that have used these in their job search, I've spoken to at least 2 or 3 people that have done it. And again, it's not a huge sample size. I know that. But the people that I know who have done it have not been satisfied. It's just they're not getting the responses because it doesn't have the personal element to it. You know, let's just talk pure math. If you're applying to a job at a major company, let's say IBM, massive organization, huge company, or even Boston University. It's a company of, BU has 30 some odd thousand, employees across the different campuses, if I recall correctly. That means that they're a huge employer, which means that if you're applying, there's probably thousands of people that apply to each job. So, to bubble up to the top of that search is a tall task anyway. And if somebody comes across your stuff and it doesn't look that personal or look that authentic, they're probably going to pass on it to go. So, save your money, spend some time being strategic and use some networking, both tactical, where you're reaching out to people after you applied to a job, and then expanding your network on a broader basis.
So separately from leveraging a service that does that for you, are you aware, if you start to get a little bit more advanced with something like ChatGPT, you've got a paid version where you can actually create your own AI agent. Are those capable of conducting job searches and applying for positions on my behalf?
Wow, I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Um,
I think the research end of that makes quite a bit more sense. However, the thing you have to remember is that a lot of these large language models like ChatGPT have been trained on information that's over 6 months old, right? So certainly for doing research on a company or even predictions on hiring trends, but it's not going to necessarily be able to give you up to the date, hey, this company just posted a new opportunity through one of these, like a Chat GPT or something.
So Sherry Currington here has a comment where she says, I've applied to 259 roles and landed 25 interviews with an AI engine customizing my resume. I mean, that's appropriate. That's a great use of it. But you still got to, Sherry, I'm sure you still invested a lot of time in making sure you had a good, solid product to start with that you're building on as a foundation. You need to have that foundation to put on top of it. But yes, that's a great use case for it. And I just Googled it. It doesn't look like you can use it to apply directly, but you can build all the documentation through there.
Yeah, seems like a lot of folks here are chiming in the comments that what it can and can't do. Can HC mentions you just get a lot of noise, and it's hard to distinguish real jobs from those that have maybe been hired before, et cetera, et cetera. But thanks, folks, for weighing in on the chat. Uh,
I say this at the risk of being, sounding like a Luddite, but the truth of the matter is that technology can't do everything for you. We have a lot of things that uh, we do that require a strong personal touch, and people still want that authenticity. They still want that. They still want to work with somebody that demonstrates some of that authenticity. So again, think of it as your assistant. Don't think of it as your agent.
yeah. Scott, we've got about 10 minutes left. I know you personally always want to make sure everybody gets answers to your questions. Do you have a hard stop at one, or could we go over by a couple
Ah,
minutes?
let's go.
Okay, and just as a reminder for anybody that does need to leave, I'm going to send the full recording out to everybody who might not be able to stick around. So I think this will be a great question for you again from Mark. Since AI is taking over all jobs such as programming, help desks, etc., are there any careers that you feel are relevant today? When you've been working with clients, where are you seeing opportunities that might not be quite as impacted by AI and other sorts of, replacements for particularly entry level workers? I think is, I read a lot about how that's the generation of the workforce that's really being impacted by job cuts. But what are you seeing as the opportunities, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, let's first, look, I'm going to debunk that a little bit. I mean, it's not taking over everything. It's not, and we're still at the early stages, and I think we're still in use cases. I'm hearing a lot about companies that, they made a commitment they were going to outsource this function and that function, and they realized they couldn't do it. Then they had to bring the things back in, and they brought people in. Um, so I don't think it's happening. I think what's happening is that AI has been moving through different components of these, and I think it's becoming a part of this and it's becoming part of a workflow. But I don't think it's taking over everything. I think the example that I would give is, for example, offshoring, right? Here we were, you know, during the late 90s, we had the internet really start to kind of come about and really be a major presence. But offshoring didn't really come into real earnest until probably about the mid to late 2000s. It was there, but it really didn't develop yet in terms of that area. So I think we're still kind of at that. And again, I'm not a thought leader here, so please don't view me as that. And I've seen the documents from your professors. There's some good stuff there. But, I think we're still early in that curve. But I think you've got to think about, again, I'm going to go back, Mark, to the question of value add, right? What is it that you can do as a human being that AI isn't quite doing well at this point, right? Um, so, consulting is one of those areas. I think if you're looking at finance, finance is an example, and I get it. It's a training curve, but you can use the AI to work through some scenarios and to build up some, projections and some, various ideas. But in the end, you've still got to look at it. You've got to still come up with what's the data say and how are you going to apply it. Um, so, even fields like accounting, it's not going away. There's still elements of it that are becoming there. I think the bigger concern is more efficiencies. I think you're seeing where, there are jobs that are being done more with less. The analogy that I would use is an auto worker, right? The factories that you have that build cars, they're not hiring the same number of people that they used to assemble those cars because there's more robotics and automation. But you still got to have some people to guide things and to push things through. So, I think every job but I think there's so much uncertain right now. I think we don't know what the AI engines are going to be able to do. I think we're still seeing some use cases that are coming along. I think another thing is that, I think we're also going to see some government guardrails that are going to come into play too. What are they going to allow AI to use, and what are they not going to allow them to use? So, um, it's a tough question. I don't have a clear answer for you, a specific one, but I think that there are some fields that are a little more vulnerable, like customer service specialist. That is probably one of the most vulnerable because you can do chat through that. Um, but things that are really truly value add are the ones that I think, have a longer horizon. I'm not going to lie. I wonder how long I'm going to have in terms of my, resume writing. I don't know. Is the horizon 10, 15, 20 years? I don't know. Is the horizon 5 years? I don't know. But, as long as I can continue to add value on top of the process, that's
Right.
that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Scott, a lot of the questions that got upvotes were asked, in some cases 20 minutes ago. And so you've touched on these, but I want to make sure
Sorry.
people hear their answers. Jessica mentions I've had a lot of difficulty getting anything helpful from Chat GPT for hiring docs without massive editing. Do you have any tips for how to better use it for honing cover letters? It's all about what you put in, right?
Well, so here's the thing, all right? With if you've got a premium subscription on any of these services, you have the ability to upload both the resume and the job description that you're targeting. So, that's one way that you're going to get a better product as opposed to just saying, write me a cover letter for an accounting assistant. Okay, well, what does that do? The more data that you put in, the more it can pull from, and the more that you can shape. Aside from that, the other pieces, I would suggest breaking it into small pieces. Um, you know, hey, Copilot, can you go ahead and can you take this specific job and create a paragraph or a cover letter around this? It's going to be more concise, it's going to be more clear, and it's going to have something a little more sharp in terms of content.
Cindy asks, what percentage of jobs seen on LinkedIn are real versus old, already filled, or scam bot generated? Do you have any insight on that?
All right. So the question of jobs being real versus not real. Um, there are two primary. All right. So there's a few different places to look at jobs. The first one is Indeed, right? Indeed is the big job board. And I'm going to come to LinkedIn in a moment. But on Indeed, companies have to pay to have their job up there. So if a job is up there, there's a good reason that they have it up there, and it's usually because they have to fill it. And if it's going to cost me $300-400 just to get it up there, that's a pretty decent expense, so it's going to cost. Now, LinkedIn tends to work a little bit differently. LinkedIn has historically had what's called slots. In other words, you're not paying to post up an individual job, but like, let's say I've got a company, I've got 3 job slots that I can keep up at any given time. I can, I can change the job in one of those slots at any given point. I'm paying for it regardless. So I think on LinkedIn, there may be the potential that there's probably a slightly higher one that's got to go through there. That there's probably a slightly higher percentages to an unreal job. On company websites, it may be even higher, and the reason is because the company it doesn't cost them anything additional besides their web hosting to post a job on their company website. Now, let's back up a second. Why might a company post a job that's not real? Um, a company might post a job because they want to make sure that they seem like they're hiring, make sure they seem like they're an exciting and a vibrant organization. They got a lot of stuff going on. They might, but there's other reasons too. Number one, they might have a confidential job search they're working on, like somebody's not cutting it and they need to replace them, so they want to go ahead and they get some resumes. Also, there might be they might not think it's a fake job, but it ends up being one in the sense that, they didn't think there was going to be an internal candidate that applied, but at the last minute, someone inside the company has raised their hand. Now, all of a sudden, there's no point to having that job out there. So, I would say 95% of the jobs, 97% of the jobs that are on there are very, very real. It's, the other thing too is if I'm a recruiter and I'm being asked to post jobs that don't exist, I'm going to be like, why the hell am I doing this? I've got enough other stuff, real stuff to work on too.
Yeah. You just a few minutes ago spoke about bubbling up for applications to get to the top of the stack. Bob is mentioning that he's got a colleague who recently applied to a position that had 7,000 applications. How, what's your best advice for leveraging AI to make sure that you're seeing bubbling up out of that group of people?
I mean, again, put the job description in, put your resume, put the resume in, ask it to give you some suggestions or help you hone it so it's a better match. That's the best thing you can do. But here's the thing, okay? So if I'm a recruiter and I'm working on sorting through resumes, if I've got 10,000 resumes of people that have applied to job, which at Amazon, by the way, is not an unusual case scenario. Um, if I've got 10,000 people that have applied to the job and I've got 40 open jobs and I've got a hiring manager screaming behind me saying that he needs to talk to me, what am I going to do? Am I going to spend my time going through all the resumes, or am I going to just go through till I've got a stack of 5 or 10 that I like and I'm going to move on? Because at that point, I can move on and I can at least stop the bleeding. I think the idea that, first of all, if anybody sells you on the idea they can get you to the top of the pile, they're selling you a false dream. It's just not realistic. But it's a different story if you're working with a headhunter and the headhunter's got the hiring manager's direct attention. Okay, that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, it's, the best thing you can do. Again, spend some time, tweak the resume, use AI to help do that if you need to. Send the resume, find the hiring manager, let them know that you've applied. That's the best thing you can do.
So given that, Kristen or Christine just mentioned in the chat, what are your thoughts on headhunters? And it, how much of that should be part of your strategy to leverage a human who can help you sort of navigate that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, we should probably think about a webinar just focused on that whole
Yeah.
aspect of it. But working with staffing firms, headhunter is not the politically correct way of calling it, but it's kind of the nickname. But if it's important to keep in mind that the recruiter works for the company, not you. They're getting paid by the company to find somebody to fill the job, which means their loyalty is not to you, which means that the best thing you can do is make connections, reach out to folks that specialize in particular, types of jobs. Let's say you're in finance, you find a finance recruiter, or you're in IT, you find an IT recruiter. You reach out to them, hi, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Scott. I'm a finance professional looking at my next opportunity. I've attached my resume in case an opportunity crosses your desk that might be a match for my skills and experience. Love to talk to you. Um, Thank you so much. That's really, the thing you've got to keep in mind. Also, the other thing is if you do engage with a headhunter, whether it's executive search or retained search or whatever the case may be, don't just be a taker. Don't expect these people to go and find a job for you. Make sure that you understand they're working for, the client, not you, but also maybe you're not the right fit, but maybe you know somebody that you can refer. That's going to build some social capital with them if you can refer somebody.
We have a ton of people that just have like industry specific and role specific questions for you, Scott. I think at this point it would take us another 45 minutes to get through all of these, but I know you've been super generous with sharing your expertise one on one. Do you, if possible, do you want to put up that last slide from your presentation with your
Absolutely.
contact details? And do you want to say a little bit more about how you can help people navigate some of these challenges?
Absolutely. So through my business, I provide resume writing, career coaching, LinkedIn profile development, bios, all of the above, outplacement services as well. So, I work with companies in terms of helping people get a soft landing if that's the case. But if somebody's interested and, they'd like to explore services, they can always reach out to me. This is my contact information that comes directly to me. So don't worry about that. And if you're looking for a free consultation, happy to do that.
You've always been super generous with your time, and I know you're not going to charge anybody for that. Just to get an answer to the question that they might really want to ask
Yeah.
you for your take on. So, Scott, this was outstanding, and I really want to credit our guests today for chiming in with some great questions and some great comments in the chat. But Scott, you mentioned you and I have been doing this over 10 years together. You've always done this out of the kindness of your heart, your care for Boston University and all of our success. So I can't say it enough. And words at this point, I've been thanking you for so many years now. They feel like they're not doing it justice. But I really appreciate you and want to thank you on behalf of everybody who was here today.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for attending. Fantastic questions. Fantastic. I hope I've answered your questions sufficiently here. This is an emerging field. There's a lot of uncertainty and still a lot of this. So, there's things I still need to keep learning on.
A lot of those questions don't have great answers today, and I think you did a good job of addressing all of them. So, thank you again, Scott, and I want to thank all of our guests for joining us and say a special thank you to those of you who, like Scott, have donated your money to support the university. We really appreciate it. Again, our next event in this series is coming up this Thursday, September 18th. We're going to have a fascinating panel discussion with some amazing BU alumni and a couple BU administrators. It's called Level Up Your Career with BU's AI Thought Leaders. We'll be talking about a lot of the same topics today. You can sign up for that now on our website at bu.edu/alumni. And thank you, everybody, for your time. We wish you the best of luck as you navigate this job search Wild West. And I hope you all have a great day or a great evening wherever in the world you might be. Take care.